Hey, I'm going to use this time to reflect on my year of 2021. It'll be an annual review of sorts. And do know, I published one on my website that is about 9,000 words, and that one will probably be a lot more detailed. I think this one will be a little bit more off the cuff, a little bit more probably just scattered and sporadic. I think I'm going to just there's always, I don't know, it's funny. You always get a different lens and a different window into somebody's life when you hear them talking about something versus writing about something. So I'm going to probably talk about the same themes, but I'll skip through different things and just try to give you this big picture look at my life in this year that was 2021. To begin, I think that 2021 was a year of commitment. I committed to my writing, my business, my existing social circle, and this new place that I call home, Austin, Texas. And I want to start there because I think that commitment is important in terms of getting a frame into where I am in my life and how I'm thinking about things. So what happened when I started my entrepreneurial journey was I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I didn't know what the thing that I had, the special skill, the unique perspective, the personal monopoly that I was building, I didn't know what that was going to be. And so I was living in New York at the time, and New York is just this hustle and bustle place. There's so much energy, there's so much life there. And so I just sort of rode that. And I just sort of tried all these different experiments, and I said, okay, what's going to pay off? And eventually this idea of online writing was the thing that started to click for me. And so I started Write a Passage, and I started saying, oh, wow, I'm really interested in ideas. I wasn't interested in ideas growing up. There are all of these things that surprised me. And I did that for a few years, and eventually Write a Passage actually became successful. I ended up being somebody who was an online writer rather than being somebody who wanted to be an online writer, who thought, wait, that's not me as an identity, or I could never do that. And so then, of course, the coronavirus happened, and really the last year and a half has been about sinking into this identity of being this online writing guy and of really focusing on education. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reflect on my 2021 goals, and then I'm going to look forward to 2022. So as I do that reflection, I'll say, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, and for the things that didn't go well, why? Like, what was actually happening in my life that didn't allow me to accomplish these goals that were presumably very important to me at the beginning of the year? So I'll start with the first one. I wanted 80,000 email subscribers by the end of the year, and I got to about 65,000. So I fell about 15,000 email subscribers short. And look, the reason why this is a big deal is because they say that the money is in the list, like an online business. That's a popular saying that I've definitely bought into. Nothing in my life correlates to growth in business more than getting new email subscribers. And honestly, this year, I just at times wasn't as big of a priority as it should have been. And I have two issues. The first issue is that I'm super reliant on Twitter as my go-to place where I get email subscribers, which is fine, but I don't love writing Twitter threads. They're fine, but I adore the act of writing essays. Like, that's what I live for, writing long form essays. So when I don't write Twitter threads and I focus on essays, the rate that I grow email subscribers just isn't nearly as fast. The second thing is that my YouTube and my other channels, such as even my website ability to get people to enter their email for my site after they read articles, I haven't focused on those funnels enough. So it's actually not easy enough for people to sign up for my email list. Like, I'll see big spikes in people reading my articles, and my email list doesn't grow in accordance with that. But then I'll publish a Twitter thread and boom, it'll explode. And so those were the big things. And then the other thing that was very particular to this year is Twitter changed its algorithm to deprioritize link posts. And what that means is that if you share a tweet and it links out to something, those kinds of tweets used to perform a lot better on Twitter than they do now. And the reason makes sense from a business perspective. Basically, Twitter doesn't want its users to click off the platform because Twitter makes money from advertising. So if you're scrolling, you're seeing ads and all those sorts of things. But if I link to, say, a workshop, which is what I used to do in the past, now all those people are no longer on Twitter and the algorithm doesn't want that. Whereas if someone's promoting a Twitter thread or something, well, they're going to stay on the platform. They're going to see more ads. And so Twitter's really prioritizing threads. That's how you grow. And then I link to my email list at the bottom and boom, that's how the list grows. So you'll see, and I'm putting a graph over the screen now, that my email subscriber growth, at least the rate at which it's happening, has declined. So there is beginning to be a plateau, and I don't want that. I'm very concerned about that. So we'll talk about that in a bit as we talk about 2022, but that was the first thing of the year. The second thing is then there's YouTube. So I invested a lot in YouTube. This channel, you should subscribe to it if you don't already. You'll see as you look through my videos, they've improved a lot this year, and we've put in a lot of effort here. We've tried to stick to a weekly cadence. It's been hard because there's a bunch of people involved. This is something that isn't, like, I'm not the one doing everything from writing the scripts to editing the videos. I mean, there's so many people involved here, and this is really about building a team. And it's been a whole different kind of production, whereas when I write, the stuff that is on Perell.com, I have written all of that, and I go through from A to Z. I'm so focused on that, whereas the YouTube stuff, I want a team. That way I can get help and make the videos way better. And also, I mean, when it comes to script writing, I want to be a great long-form essayist. I don't want to be a great YouTube script writer, which is why I get help there. But look, the thing is, YouTube rewards these timely clickbait titles, these exaggerated controversies, these annoying photos that you have to share in the thumbnails. And look, the algorithm, that's what the algorithm wants. And at some level, you got to play that game. And I accept that. I'm putting my hands up. I accept that. That's fine. But there's a certain level to which I don't want to do it. And so, look, I think that always there's a tension between the art and the medium. If you only serve the art, your audience doesn't grow. If you only serve the medium, your work loses a sense of soul and individuality. And I'm always trying to balance those two things. And honestly, we're still trying to figure out how to do that here. I think a lot of great YouTubers, like Nerdwriter, who I really look up to, he's done an amazing job at getting both. He serves the medium of YouTube by coming up with these essays, but they're so good and they're so unique to who he is. And I want to figure out how to do that. And I didn't figure that out this year. So all that to say, I ended the year with 17,000 subscribers. I mean, that is not even half of what I wanted. And who knows, did I set my goal? Was it too high? I don't know. I'm just telling you, this is what I set out. This is what I accomplished. And it wasn't where we want them to be. Now, the good news is that the quality of the videos improved a lot. And there's a quantitative way to look at that, and there's a qualitative way to look at that. The quantitative way is what's called rolling average retention. So what this means is what is the percentage of a YouTube video that people watch? And early in the year, it was like 25%. So when people would come on and watch a video, people would only watch 25% of that video. Whereas towards the end, we were at almost 50%. And that's good. What we did, I remember there's this one Google Doc that we had, and I can show a video on the screen. And so if you look at this, what we did was we looked at, say, the Kobe Bryant video. We ended up moving away from sports, but we looked at this and we said, okay, in green, these are the places where people stay and they keep watching the video, whereas in red, these are the places where people don't. And this is where people are dropping off. And so what we would do is we would look at our videos every week and we would say, what is causing people to stay and what's causing people to leave? And through that, the quality of our videos got a lot better. Now, I got to admit, there's all sorts of traps. There's all sorts of traps. And halfway through the year, maybe a little bit later in the fall, I said to the team, look, we are now too driven by data. We're too driven by metrics because our videos were like quantitatively performing better, but our videos were actually getting worse. So the data was saying one thing, the quality of the videos, which is an intuitive sense, was going the other way. And that's fine. I said to the team, you know what? Trust your gut, trust your judgment for what a quality video is. And I think that we've made our best videos at the end of the year. But look, more than any other platform, YouTube decides the success of creators. And at some level, you have to just put up your hands and you just have to say, okay, YouTube, I have faith that it's going to work. And I actually have a friend named Chris Williamson. He runs a podcast called Modern Wisdom. Very good. And he spent some time in Austin this year. And so we spent a decent amount of time talking about this. And one of the things that was wild was that in February of 2021, he had more views in 1 hour than in the previous 6 months of the channel combined. And then also, he had faster subscriber growth and more views in that month than in the previous 2 years combined. And so there's a certain amount of persistence that YouTube rewards, and who knows when the algorithm is gonna help your videos take off. And then one final thing on the YouTube front. You'll see if you look at the screen now what my set looked like at the beginning of the year, and then you'll see what it looked like at the end of the year. And we'll put them side by side. And you can see that there's a lot of changes here. The first is, at the beginning of the year, the set was very cluttered, and that plant kind of takes up a lot of space, and the books are very loud, and then I don't look quite as sharp. And then in the second set, I look more defined. The plant isn't as aggressive. The lighting is better. Like if you look at the color of the wall and the shadow, there's a lot more going on there. And then also the books aren't so loud. And also you'll see they're softer. There's a bokeh effect that's happening. So this is the result of new camera, new lens. I have 7 different lights in here. It's crazy. Changing around that bookshelf, but the actual space is the exact same. And this was a wild learning for me this year of just what lenses and lighting can do to a space. I mean, this is the exact same space, everything in the exact same location, and it just looks totally different. So I do think that the set has improved quite a bit, and that's something that we want to continue to work on. Then I wanted to get 700 rite of passage students. We fell just short of that. I'm not super concerned about that. And I'm going to end by talking a lot about rite of passage. I wanted to write 2 long-form essays. I started the year writing a piece called Saving the Liberal Arts with Jeremy Giffen, who, if you don't know, you should follow him on Twitter. He's just a brilliant human being. And let's see, I feel like that piece, we've spent some time talking about it, so I don't think he'll be surprised by anything that I'll say. But it didn't really resonate like we thought it could have or should have. And I think we could have done a better job editing it. It's probably too long. It's all over the place. And yeah, it only did okay. You know, a lot of the comments on it were that it was just too long. And I think that that's right. But at the same time, I think that there's 2 good things about it. The first is that the individual arguments within it, I think, are really interesting. And there's some stuff in there that isn't really being spoken about. You know, there's a lot about the liberal arts that's about politics. But this is different. This is sort of thinking through economics. It's about thinking through culture. And then I think it just leads into the, you know, when you write these long-form essays, they always change you. And so you have to think, how did this piece change me? And fundamentally, I'm now all in on studying the liberal arts. So even if I got nothing out of the piece, hypothetically, if I got nothing out of the piece, like not one person read it, it did change the direction of my intellectual life, which is a good success. But I want to get these ideas out there. And I want to start a conversation about the liberal arts that isn't happening right now. And I think it's a problem that it's not happening right now, which I'll also talk about later. So I published that piece, I don't know, maybe June or July or something. And then instead of doing another long form essay, I have been working on a documentary about my favorite musician, Porter Robinson. And this has been a ton of work and like the most fun I've had working on a project in a long time. I just fell in love with this guy's music. Right now, I think it's an hour and 20 minutes, the latest cut that I saw. And I said, hey, this story needs to be told. There's a bunch of animations and visuals and his music online. And so what if we took all that, we brought it all together and we told his story in a way that had never been told before. And so, here's a fun story. So, see, this is the stuff you can do on YouTube like this. You can't really do in a long form essay. So, when I was in New York, basically what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to work on this essay and I'm going to follow Porter around the country. So I went to New York. For a show. I went to a show in Austin and then went to a show in Dallas. And so when I was in New York, I was with a friend and I was showing him the first cut of the first documentary. It was very different. And he said, who's opening tonight? And I said, oh, it's a guy named Jai Wolf. And he's like, Jai Wolf? I love Jai Wolf. And guess what? I know his manager. I was like, no way. So we go to the show, we arrive at the club, and it was more of a venue, bigger than a club. We arrive at the venue, and we go over, we get some Michelob Ultras, and he's texting his friend, and this is Jai Wolf's manager. So we meet him at the front, like right next to the stage. And he's like, no way, it's great to meet you, send me the documentary. Watch this documentary. I remember we went to the show on like a Thursday. We talked like the next Tuesday. He's like, dude, I love the documentary. It's really interesting what you're doing. And during my time in New York, everyone was like, yes, Porter or his team involved in this. I was like, no. Like, why would I do that? And everyone was looking at me like I was insane. And I was like, why would I get Porter involved? And so when I got back to Austin, I was like, yeah, those people were right. And I had a call with Jai Wolf's manager, and he calls me and says, hey, man, I think you're really onto something. I'd love to introduce you to Porter's team. So he then sent the documentary to Porter's team. And as of now, they're just helping us with whatever we need, which is crazy that I didn't think about that and that I underestimated my ability to do that. I don't know what was going on there, but something about music just feels like a very foreign world to me. And so they've been a help, and it means that at least when it's published, it'll get in Porter's hands, which I'm really excited about. And when the documentary is released, I'm gonna, because why not, host a big party and rent out a movie theater in Austin and invite a bunch of friends. So I have people flying in from around the country, which I'm psyched about. I'm just psyched about that. This project really means a lot to me now that I'm talking about it. And I think the fact that it has nothing to do with anything else that I'm working on, I'm not making money from it or anything, I don't know, something about that adds to it. I want to do more projects like that. The next thing is to work with a philosophy tutor. So when I was living in New York, one of the really cool things that I got to do was we had this group of, I don't know, like 6 friends or something. And we used to study philosophy together on Fridays and Saturday nights. So we had a tutor. And he was a PhD at Columbia, and he would work with us on whatever we were interested in. And we'd sit down. It was a really good time. And I wanted to recreate that this year. So actually in last year's annual review, I said that I wanted to do it. And I had a reader reach out to me and say, hey, I know this guy named JP who would be great to help you in philosophy. And so we worked with him until about the summer. And then he graduated. He got his PhD. And then ended up getting a job in Dallas or Houston or something like that. And then we just never ended up meeting because, look, there's an opportunity to do Zoom, but I'm just tired of being on the computer. I actually, these books right here, this is The Story of Civilization by Will Durant, all this series. And I was in a book club for that too, and it was on Zoom. And the last thing I want to do after a long day is hop on Zoom and just spend more time on the computer, you know? And so, yeah, I really want to pursue these ideas, but I got to find people in Austin who I can meet with in person. It's just so much better. And so, anyway, this worked out really well. He just moved, and I sort of led the book club, and we were studying the blind spots of Enlightenment thinking. And so, the Enlightenment is all about reason, and it's all about empiricism, and it's all about validated truth. And I think that there's a lot of good things about that, but what are the bad things? What are the trade-offs that we made with this Enlightenment style thinking? Interesting to me. I don't really understand it. And so we started by reading thinkers like Locke and Galileo, and we didn't get as far as I would have wanted, but it was really enjoyable. So this is us sitting on the lake in Austin, just talking, and this is Jonathan B., who I'm about to record a series with on Rene Girard. And Jonathan was the person who I spent the most time with this year, and is a classically trained philosopher from Columbia. It is just brilliant. He's about to move back to New York, which is quite the hit to my intellectual life, I will say that. And but really became a very dear friend. And that's actually one of the big successes of this year, is spending so much time with Jonathan. We probably got dinner, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, we lived in the same building in Austin, which made it so easy. And then I, at the beginning of the year, wanted to get tournament good at tennis. And it's so funny to think about this, because there's some goals that like you want, but you don't actually want them. And I think this was one of them. And I learned a lesson, actually. Because maybe I did want it, but I had a tennis coach in Austin, and I thought he was fine. I didn't necessarily think he was good, and he definitely wasn't great. And so I was like, I need a great tennis coach. I need to find the best tennis coach in Austin. And so what I did was I stopped working with this guy. And I realized that I shouldn't have done that. I should have just kept working with him. Like on Wednesday mornings, we would hit. And I should have just said, hey, I have a good tennis coach. That's what I need. The most important thing is to stay consistent. But the other thing here is tennis is quite a social game. It helps to play with other people. And I just don't have a lot of friends in Austin who are avid tennis players. So I didn't really have a lot of push towards playing. But look, the good news is I got back into golf, and golf's the opposite. Like, I got recruited to play Division I golf coming to college. I basically only played golf for high schools my entire life. And I have 4 really good friends in Austin who play. And this year I just got back into it, which I'm psyched about. So the tennis sort of became the golf, and I'm okay with that. Look, I don't know, maybe it's like a paradox of an annual review, but in some way, if you achieve all your goals, maybe you're actually too tied to the vision that you set at the beginning of the year. Maybe that's actually a problem. You're not allowing life to unfold on its own. Maybe. I think there's something to that. And so, as I'll mention in a second, I actually set fewer goals for 2022. But there is always a balance between taking what life gives you and the serendipity of it all and saying, sort of exerting your will on the world, right? No, this is what I want. I'm getting it. And then I'll end the year by just talking about travel. I spent a lot of time exploring cities in North America. I went to Mexico and lived in Oaxaca during the summer, which was really cool. I lived with 3 friends, and Oaxaca is just a wonderful place. I read a book like 5-6 years ago, and it took place in Oaxaca, and it seemed like this place that was just buzzing with culture, and it had this nightlife, and it almost had this Mexican mystery to it. And it was like a kind of a spiritual place. There was something very elusive about it, and the way that the writer wrote about it, I was like, I gotta go there. And so that's what I did. I lived there for a month with 3 friends in the city, and it was great. I want to do that every year. I want to do that every year, at least for the next couple of years, of saying, hey, the summers in Austin are brutal. I'm going to take that time. I'm going to live somewhere else and explore a new place. And by doing that, I'm going to force myself not to work as hard during those times. And then this year, outside of Oaxaca, I also visited New York, Los Angeles, San Diego, Montreal, Dallas, Miami, and San Francisco. I was just all over the place, which was so fun. And I really like visiting cities. I get so much energy from it. I like coming in and figuring out, okay, what's the economy, what's the culture, all these sorts of things. Let's bring it all together. And then I've written some mini pieces about my reflections on the city, on the cities that I visited, and people seem to like those. So I enjoy doing that a lot. And I think even though Austin's going to be my home base, visiting these different places is something I'm going to do more of. Although I wish I'd written something about Oaxaca, and I didn't. And I don't know why. I just didn't have something sort of form for me, even though it was a very special experience. There was something about the experience that was just pure enjoyment of like, it just felt like laid back and just sort of experiencing the world. And I think that I am better at writing about metropolitan cities that are like big hubs for trade and stuff like that, and that have, millions of people. I'm just better at that than a city of 20 or 30,000 people. So maybe that's part of it. I would like as a writer to do a better job of putting words to those small interactions and to make sense of what the culture of a city is and how do I explain it. I think that's something I can definitely get better at. So maybe next year it's something that I'll do with wherever I live. One thing that happened in Oaxaca that was really nice was I found this gym, and it was like this grungy, it was called Black's Gym. And it was this like grungy sort of warehouse vibe. And I just love this place. There are these photos, these giant, 8-foot high photos on the wall of people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and stuff. And it set this mood, this intensity for working out. Everyone in there was like drenched in sweat. It was a badass place. And it made me love working out again. I would walk in there, it's like, let's go. And I realized that I had lost a lot of the joy that I'd brought to working out for so long. And I think it had something to do with the pandemic. Like, I would work out at this gym in Austin that's very convenient for me, but often empty. And like, by all accords, like solid gym. But there weren't people in there. And it wasn't like there wasn't music blasting. And it didn't have this culture of intensity. And I needed that. So when I got back to Austin, I made a bet with a friend around weightlifting. I hired a trainer. And I got to work. And I think that my fitness and diet at the second half of 2021 was the best it's been in my life. I gained a couple pounds of muscle, and I also just enjoyed it a lot. So I'll end with this photo that my roommate in Oaxaca took, Mariana Phillips. And it was my favorite photo of the year. And it's just me drawing in our living room at night. And something about the lighting here, the vignette, the composition of the piece, or of the photo just looks really cool. And I think something about it actually represents my theme of the year of commitment and focus. And, I'm not trying to like explore a bunch of new things. I'm trying to take the things that I do well, the things that I like, and really double down on them, and to find, so often people talk about the 80-20. How do we get 80% out of 20? But in a world of power laws, that last 20% really matters. And I'm almost on the 20-80 now. I'm trying to say, how do I, for 80% of the work, I know, but for 80% of the work, get that last 20 and really build really meaningful friendships and a solid business, because most of the meaning is in that last 20. And there's something about this photo that captures the focus, captures the deliberation, the contemplation required to think through that. So now I'll switch from 2021 to 2022. And look, as I reflected on my year, I didn't hit as many goals as I would have wanted. And so I started off and I was like, all right, bro, you should try so much harder this year. It's all about trying, work harder. But I just don't think that's the solution. First of all, I worked really, really, really hard for 5 years. As I was building Rite of Passage, I would at least like to dial that down to really hard or really, really hard instead of really, 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 really hard, if you know what I mean. And also attention's finite and the time has to come from somewhere, right? And so a lot of thinking through the goals for next year was about reducing goals, about removing things from my life and sort of freeing up space. And then sort of with that, I now have the ability to hire and to lead a team. And increasingly my goals depend on that. So I'll start with Rite of Passage and then I'll dive into some personal stuff. But it's time. We got to have a weekly all hands meeting. Everyone on my team does end of week reports. At least my my production manager, my assistant, they both do it. And I want to get everyone doing it because I have other people who do beginning of week reports. So I'm fine with either one. But I just want to know what went well this week, what are people struggling with, and where do people need help? And then through that, get a roadmap for what people are working on. I give people tons of autonomy. And so I'm sort of really careful with who we let into the organization, but once they get through the interviewing, the filtering process, I try to just give them a lot of the ability to just be free and do what suits them best. And I mean, at remote work, I kind of don't have a choice sometimes because people live so far away. There's solutions to that, but I'm not really interested in them. And then there's production. This is actually a big thing. Actually, right before I recorded this, perfect example. So I just bought this base, this station where I can plug in USB stuff and for the microphone. And I couldn't figure out why the base wasn't working. So I spent 10, 15 minutes why isn't this base working? It wasn't turning on. Okay, so I figured it's not turning on. Why? There's this power cord. So I had to trace the cord down. And then my extension cord, it wasn't fully plugged in. So it was off by 2 inches, 1 inch of being plugged in. And it cost me 15 minutes. And this stuff happens all the time. I mean, I'll make mistakes with audio levels and all that. And it drives me insane. Sometimes I'll record, my SD card is full. I'm not using it right now. I got a teleprompter for the scripted videos. There's just a bunch of stuff in here. It's a little too cluttered. And I would love to have somebody who can just help and manage that. I can show up and boom, it's time to hit record. Then one thing that's been tricky for the past, since cohort 3, so we're about to do cohort 8, so the last 4 cohorts or so, one thing that's been tricky is our preparation for live sessions. It's just taken a lot of work. We've redone the entire curriculum, and that was for cohort 5. Cohort 6, we said, okay, how do we improve on that curriculum? Cohort 7, we took out 4 live sessions. Finally, I think that we are beginning to have less work in terms of live session preparation. It's going to be at least less than 3 preparation sessions, probably 2, and maybe we can do one of them before the course starts. And the reason this is important is because in the past, I haven't really done a lot of writing for my own stuff during Rite of Passage. So it's been, we have the launch, and then we have the live sessions, and I just don't write for 2 months. And then this year, I was burnt out for the entire month of October. So that's 3 months without writing. And I only published 7 long-form essays this year. I would probably like to publish more. I'll talk about that in a second, but I think part of the reason is I just get burnt out. I just don't have a lot of time during Rite of Passage. But look, that live session preparation paid off. And it paid off in all these ways that are a little bit hard to define. But one of them is that now the whole curriculum is around 3 pillars. Write from abundance, write from conversation, and write in public. And all those 3 pillars are unique to online writing. And I can run with those pillars forever. I mean, the implications of those 3 ideas, you could teach multiple courses on. And so now I'm going to go from 4 to 8 hours of preparation which I did definitely in cohort 5 and 6, to just like 60 minutes, maybe the day before, and then a full dress rehearsal, and then boom, let's go live. Then the other thing I would like to do is eliminate internet access when I read. So what I do is it used to be I would read on my iPad and I would read on my Kindle, but now I just really like reading hardcovers. And so what I do is I'll read, and as I read, I will have these sort of stickies. And then whenever I come across something that's good, I'll put a sticky note, like a little tab on the side. And then once I finish the chapter, once I finish a couple chapters, I'll go in and I will either, if they also sell the Kindle book, I'll go in and I'll make the actual highlights in the Kindle book. It's fine, I buy both, but it's worth saving time. And also, like, I want to support the world of books. And then if they don't have the Kindle book, what I'll do is I use an app called Readwise. And what I'll do is I will use their OCR text recognition feature. And you'll see on the screen right now, I'll take the photo and it'll automatically go into my Evernote. And so that's always really helpful. And by doing that, I can't pick up my phone. I just can't pick up my phone when I read because it's just distracting, and I got to keep it away from me. And then I can just do deep reading. And that's what it's about. I was reading Aldous Huxley this morning, a book called Brave New World Revisited. And I was just in such a flow reading this thing. And I was like, wow, I just am always sort of enchanted by the quality of ideas that you can get when you really soak into a book that you're not going to find in basically anything on the internet, with small exceptions. And those are notable exceptions for sure. But there's something about the book and the focus reading, and also just the kinds of books that you get into. You know, I want to spend time this year reading the Bible and stuff like that. You're not going to be reading the Bible online. So obviously, you know, I really adore online writing. It is, in many ways, the crux of my professional life. But there are certain ideas and certain books, like the Bible and like Aldous Huxley from, I think he wrote this in 1959, that I'm not going to find on Twitter. You know, I'm not going to find that on somebody's website. These require a little bit more time. And also, they can be hundreds of pages. And so it's like a different gear of reading, you know. The internet's like a lower gear. You're spinning faster, not getting as much from every pedal. There's something about a book, you know, you're going slower, a little bit more deliberate. And so for this year, my first goal, and this is going to go back to some of the things we talked about earlier, is 100,000 email subscribers. So that means I need to do about 100 per day. Well, then there's churn. So I need to do more than 100 per day because some people unsubscribe. And so that means if I'm at 65,000, say, you know, 10,000 people unsubscribe. So I probably need to get about 45,000 email subscribers to get to about 100,000, which will give me a net increase of 35,000. So I'm putting myself on the line here. This is kind of scary to say, but I'm putting myself on the line. If I don't do this, in some sense, the year is a failure. It's that important to me. Like, I can't stress how important email subscriber growth is to my business. It's everything. And so basically, email subscriber growth is like the simplest equation ever. It's just your growth equals your traffic times the quality of your offer. How many people come across whatever it is that you're doing, and then when you have an offer to get people to sign up for your list, how attractive is what you're writing to say, hey, you should sign up and this is why. So I got to work on both of those things. But there's 4 tactics that I'm going to implement. Twitter threads, then reducing the friction on my website. I mean, I had more than 1.3 million people visit my site last year. And if I can just do a better job of converting some of those people into email subscribers, great. I'll do some paid advertisements on other newsletters. To date, I've done 1 paid ad. And then we're going to do a newsletter referral program. So if people share the newsletter, they'll get something special from that. But look, if there's one sentence to remember right now, and I don't want it to be so dependent on this, but the growth comes from running Twitter threads. That's the thing. And chances are there's something like this in your life. Like, what is the thing in your life? It's worth thinking about. What is the thing in your life that is really simple? It can be a bit mundane, but you know it works and you know it makes your life better. What is that thing? And I think if you could have a good answer to that, it just gives your life a certain simplicity, and you just show up every day and you just follow through on that. So that was a big lesson for me in thinking through my own annual review. And then I want to sustain writing momentum. I spoke about earlier, I spent like 3 months, so August, September, October, not really writing much. And so there's one way to think about this. Okay, you're going to set explicit goals, but that works when you're starting something. I don't think it works as well later on. And what I mean by that is, I think of it like going to the gym. When I started working out, look, you have to earn the privilege to do something whenever you want. It's that simple. You have to earn the privilege. So when I started working out, I said, David, you're going to go to the gym every single day. And I went every single day. For like 2 years, I basically didn't miss a day of a workout because I had to build the habit. I was like, the gym? I don't do that. That's not who I am. That's somebody else. Other people look good. Other people go to the gym. That's not me. But now that I've built the habit, if I don't go to the gym, if I miss a day, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I'll just go to the next day. Because I've fallen in love with working out. And that's what I want with writing. I want to basically go from, I'm going to write every single day, to somehow, like, I don't even know how to express this, but like, I'm telling you it's real. I'm telling you it's real. It is to fall in love with an idea and the need to express it so much that you feel called and compelled to share that idea. And it's irresistible when you feel that. It's like, I need to publish this so the world won't be right. Great art and great writing comes from that. And I want to cultivate that emotion as part of my being and who I am as a creator. And so I feel that at times, like I definitely felt that with the Porter Robinson documentary, but I haven't felt it nearly as much as I would like. And the consistency is still important to me because being consistent is how I improve as a writer. And I can't get busy and distracted and fall off like I did this year. So that's a challenge that I'm setting for myself. Look, I like writing in 90-minute chunks. It's something that I've done. It's something that I absolutely think is a good place to go. And when you focus on writing, you got to focus. But now, instead of writing for a specific amount of time, I try to write to a certain goal. Like, I'm going to finish this section. I'm going to finish a draft of this piece, or the outline of the piece will be done. And also, I'm doing more writing just sort of as I walk. So I'll open up a voice note on my phone, and I'll just start recording myself. And then often by the time I get back to my house, I've worked out a lot of the problems. And then I just need to sort of condense them and organize them. That's writing from conversation, the second pillar of rite of passage. And so I don't want to have these really strict quotas in my writing. But with that said, I've been writing Monday Musings every week for 4 years. I've never missed a week. But look, writing a weekly newsletter is the very best forcing function I've found for making steady intellectual progress. I'm going to publish Monday Musings every week in 2022. Okay, so we've talked a lot about my life. I want to now go into talking about rite of passage, which I would say is like the business. And that is, look, they're connected, but it's also separate and distinct from my life as a creator. And so what I want to start talking about is, the first thing is that I need to hire an executive team for rite of passage. Look, in some ways this is hard to talk about, but I came into the business world being like, I'm going to run a business, it's going to be super operationally efficient, I'm going to be an executive, all these sorts of things. And I've discovered that I don't have a natural aptitude for it. I'm not that good at it. And I also just don't enjoy it that much, at least compared to creative life and making things, oh, that's what I love. I love the act of creation. I love that. And making videos like this one. This is what I want to be doing. And so what I found is it's really hard to be a creative and an operator. And so what I want to do is focus on the creative stuff and setting the vision for Rite of Passage. And then I would say we have 3 pillars of the business. We have product, we have operations, and we have growth. Product, I've delegated everything to Will Mannon. He's incredible. This is a photo of us hiking the Hollywood sign. I know it's super basic, but it was awesome. And I'd always wanted to do that. And then this is Becca, my producer in the middle. That was us this summer. And I sort of call him our chief vibe officer because I think that he has a really good sense of what Rite of Passage is and the energy that we try to cultivate, what we believe in, and what a Rite of Passage course is all about. And so Will runs product. And we've had a lot of conversations this year about who are we, what are we good at, where do we want to focus. And I think it's taken us a while to just realize that we're kind of like kids who just want to play in the sandbox. And creativity comes really easily to us. You know, we're those kids on the playground who can make up all the games. We're good at leading people and recruiting the people. But then, you know, we need some people who are focused on operations and the serious things. You know, we got to get some adults in charge, if you know what I mean. And so that's fine. That's fine. And like to give you what I always laugh about this, but we had a retreat in November, and we planned all of the beginning of 2022. So like the first 4 months, we didn't even look at finances, and I didn't have a profit and loss statement for Rite of Passage until November of this year, 3 years into running the business. Dude, what? If I was at business school, they would have rightly failed me for that one. Like, that stuff just doesn't come naturally to me. And I don't know, like, maybe it's okay to just have certain skills that I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to build that. At least I think that's fine. I don't need to do everything. And I'm coming to peace with that. And so I mentioned those 3 pillars. There's product, there's operations, and there's growth. And so the first thing that we're doing is we're going to hire a director of course operations. And so I've brought on a recruiter to do that. It's my first time ever working with a recruiter. And we just want to hire someone who's a rock star, someone who's built a business like this before. They can come in, they can say, boom, I know exactly what to do. I've scaled a business to $10, $20 million in revenue, and I have a vision for exactly what this business can look like. And I'm going to just say, you're in charge of operations. Don't call me unless there's an emergency. I say that tongue in cheek, but that's what I'm going to say. And I want this person to basically raise this company and help it grow up. And so that'll be the first thing. I think that'll take off the biggest headache. And some of my fears around what could happen if our operations isn't good. And then the third pillar of the business is growth. And once again, it took a while, a couple years, but we now have a really good product, a solid vision, and the ability to really grow this business. And I'm psyched about that. I'm absolutely psyched about it. And so what I want to do is now that we have the product in place, now we're getting the machinery in place. And once those 2 things are in place, it's like, boom, let's rock. Let's rock. Let's grow this thing. So let's get more students. Let's launch different products. Let's reach different markets. I don't know. I'm still thinking through that. But it's been a long time coming, and I think that there's going to be an opportunity to really scale up the growth of this thing. And so I'm starting the year off. I'm working with an agency that I've worked with in the past. They're going to be focused on marketing. So we're going to be focused on what is the messaging around Rite of Passage and how do we communicate what's happening in Rite of Passage to the broader world in a way that gets people to take the course, in a way that helps people understand what's happening in Rite of Passage. I believe it's something special. And so specifically, they're going to improve our automated email sequences, grow my email list with that referral system, those paid advertisements, create rite of passage branded email templates. I want these to be subtle, but I want it to be obvious when something is coming from David versus when something is coming from rite of passage, which is foreshadowing something I'm going to talk about a little later. They're going to oversee web development and create an ecosystem of testimonials that just show, hey, this is what people feel about rite of passage. But no matter what happens with them, even if we keep working with them, I want by the end of the year someone full-time with experience who can run growth and they can take the business to the next level. And so the question is, okay, what are you going to do, David? Well, earlier this year I had a friend who called me, and we were on the phone and saying, hey, can you help me think through some things around the business? Like, what do I do? What do employees do? How do I think about this? And he said, write down every single thing that you do in a month. Everything. There's contracts that you need to sign. There's operations things that you need to do. There's meetings that you need to host. There's articles you need to write. Write it all down. And try to basically delegate every single item on that list except for the things that you do best. And that should be a very small number of things. And so for me, I'm delegating everything in the next couple years except for vision, voice, and growth. Everything off my plate. And so vision, I have a vision for this thing that I'm psyched about. I think that I really believe in online writing. I see what writing on the internet does for people's intellectual life. I see the way it brings in friends and professional opportunities into people's lives. And I now get to help other people do the thing that when I did it, I was like, why isn't anybody talking about this? Writing on the internet has sent my life in such a more positive trajectory. And so there's that. And then there is the other idea of building something like a Kaplan. You know, you walk around America, you see this brand Kaplan, and they help people with SAT tutoring. And they have near universal brand recognition, and we can do the same thing for writing. We can be the place where people learn nonfiction writing. And look, it's not just nonfiction writing. I think that we're focused on, there's a book called 7 Powers. It's written by a Stanford professor. And he has these 7 ways that you can think of the moats that have a business be powerful. And the most interesting one, in my opinion, is counterpositioning. And what it is what does the incumbent do, and how do you do the opposite of what the incumbent does in a way that's differentiated and gives you a lasting edge? And for me, what I've seen is, I think this is a good example of counterposition. I don't think it's a great one. I want to actually work through this. But schools have this very left-brained approach to writing. And it is defined by syntax. It's defined by grammar. There's a long lineage of why schools teach writing that way, such as schools training people to often get PhDs in English and literature, and that's what writing education is. You know, so much of writing education isn't writing a business memo or writing a letter. It's, hey, we just read a Dickens novel, and now let's write about it. It's funny, right? It's a very distinct kind of writing, but that's what we think of when we think of writing in school. And the rite of passage style is very different. We're all about play, intuition, conversation, fun, laughter. It's super social. It's writing from conversation. That's second pillar of the rite of passage method. And so then on top of that, we're focused specifically on writing for the internet. There's just not a lot of people doing this. And I think it's a growing market. And so far we focused on the consumer market, but I think the business market's even bigger. And so to get back to the point here, that first thing I'm going to be focused on is vision. I want to set that vision for this company because I think it has the potential to be huge and transformative, and I'm psyched about it. And so I want to set that vision for everybody. The second is voice. I really enjoy teaching the 5-week flagship course. I've had a bunch of people who I trust they've said, hey, you don't need to teach this thing anymore. You can delegate that, move on to something else. I love it. I love it. Spending time with a couple hundred students who've paid thousands of dollars to take online writing seriously. It's about some of the most meaningful work that I can do. And I think that I'm uniquely able to inspire and set energy and run those live sessions. I love it. Those are some of the best nights of my year. So I don't want to change that, but I do want to have other satellite courses or something. I want to eventually expand the ecosystem, and I don't need to run every single course. Absolutely not. And so we've launched the Writing Studio, which is something run by Michael Dean, one of our alums, where he focuses on the art and science of crafting essays. And in that, he's really building off my practice analytically, perform intuitively motto. But it has that same right-brained feel and vibe. For him, it's about shape and color and rhythm and sound. And he's teaching writing through those things. He's a musician and an architect. And he's bringing those worlds into writing education in a way I think is really cool and rite of passagey. And it's sort of a feeling that we have around what does it mean to be rite of passagey. And that's what I mean by voice. I want to focus on the voice. Whatever that culture is, whatever we stand for as a company. And then there's growth. I think this is the core function I'll never give up. And I think this happens all the time with different founders, different people who run companies. There's one thing that they particularly are drawn to. You know, I often just look at Silicon Valley companies, and Airbnb comes to mind with Brian Chesky, who's a designer, and he'll always be a designer. That'll always be the thing that he's focused on. And with growth, though, I want to get realistic about what kinds of growth can I do well and what kinds of growth am I not as good at. And I got to thank my friend Ryan Dice, who runs a company called Scalable. And he said, look, man, there's two kinds of people. There are 0 to 1 people and 1 to 10 people. And 0 to 1 people take projects from scratch and they turn it into something. They're inventors. And then there's 1 to 10 people, and they take existing projects and they improve upon them. And you sometimes talk like you want to be a 1 to 10 person, but you're not. You're a 0 to 1 person. I think he's totally right about that. I just prefer novelty to optimization. And so what I want to do when it comes to growth, when it comes to creating, is make new things that then other people who are on the team, they can tweak and they can refine and they can optimize. And just that clarity of focusing on vision, voice, and growth says so much about, okay, what is my position within this company and where can I give the most value to it? And then where do I need to hire? What are my weaknesses? And just being honest about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to Rite of Passage in a couple minutes. I just want to focus on some other goals for 2022. And the first one is long-term friends. You know, I was so desperate to be successful, and I worked so hard, and I was one of those people who was like, okay, I work 7 days a week, and if you don't work 5 days a week, then you're not taking life seriously enough. And great. I mean, I'm kind of glad that I thought that way in a sense, but it's not how I want to live my life moving forward. And unfortunately, I didn't prioritize a lot of my relationships in the way I would have liked. And there's really 3 relationships in particular that I just want to come back to and really focus on. The first is my best friend from high school. The second is my best friend from college. And the third is my best friend for life, which I think is my sister. And so I want to do a golf trip with Xander, spend like 5 days with JJ, and then do another trip with my sister. And so I think of those 3 friends as sort of this long-term core of my social life. And I want to really invest in those friendships. And then the other thing is, now that I'm living in Austin, part of the reason I'm choosing to stay here is because so many of my friends want to have kids here. They want to buy houses here. which makes it fun that when people are investing in a place, there's a certain sense of stability and a long-term mindset that I think is unique. And so I want to cultivate a friend group with the next decade in mind. Who are people who are going to be around when I'm having kids, when I'm buying a house, when I'm sending my kids off to school. I want to be friends with those people. And so I'm thinking a lot about not just who are my friends, oh, see you Friday, see you Saturday, but who are my friends who I'm going to be seeing for many years. And I know that that's hard to predict, but it's something that I'm thinking a lot about. And then intellectually, I think my biggest goal is to just study the Bible. Most of this is intellectual, some of it is spiritual, but I grew up Jewish and I spent a lot of time going to Judaic studies classes and Hebrew classes, and I just thought the whole thing was BS, honestly, from a very young age. And as I got older, and I'll credit the Jordan Peterson lectures for this, him and Rene Girard just switched me on to thinking, hey, maybe there's a lot of wisdom in these stories. And if this is indeed the most important book in the history of the West, shouldn't I understand it at a very deep level? And so what I want to do is have 2 reading groups in Austin. One for the Christian perspective on the Bible, another for the Jewish perspective on the Bible. And then I've been watching this amazing YouTube channel called The Bible Project, just every day at lunch. That's actually how I learned economics. I watched a channel called Marginal Revolution University. And every day I'd just sit down and I would just watch a video during lunch or dinner, whenever I'd eat alone or whenever I had time to kill. I would do the same thing with the Bible and The Bible Project. It's the only YouTube channel I'm watching right now. And then I have bought some giant study guides for the Bible, which offer commentary on every page. And there's just so many things that you miss as a layman for 2 reasons. The first is there's obviously a translation from Hebrew to English, but then also the Bible is very hyperlinked as a text. So something that you could get in the book of Genesis might refer to something in the book of Revelations, which might refer to something in the Proverbs or the book of Galatians. And so it's hard when you're a beginner to pick up on those things. And there's a quote I've always liked about Plato's Republic, which is you don't really get to read it for the first time until you've read the entire thing 2 or 3 times. And I suspect that might be true for the Bible. But if you have a really good study guide that you're reading through, then maybe you can get a lot more out of your first read. And when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to this whole idea of the liberal arts, I'm really investing in this. This is something that isn't promoted a lot by the broader culture, and for the push here, I have to just thank Peter Thiel. I mean, I wrote about him in a piece called Peter Thiel's Religion in 2019, and this year I finally got to have dinner with him, which was really cool. It was probably more than any famous person I've met. It just didn't fall short of expectations at all for me or the people I had dinner with. And I was surprised to see just how much he values ideas as ends in themselves. He wanted to have the same rigorous conversation about, was Atlantis real, or the Pope, as he did about macroeconomics or how businesses are structured. And he has a better understanding of liberal arts than just about any investor I've ever met. At dinner he referenced the Bible, referenced The New Atlantis by Francis Bacon, which I read as part of a book club that was focused on the books that he was teaching in his course at Stanford. And then we were talking about Rene Girard's Battling to the End. And basically all traditional profit-oriented investors that I know would just dismiss these ideas. They'd call them, hey, no, that's superfluous. There's no need to focus on that. That's culture. We do investing. But there's something in these ideas that I think is revelatory, that's accurate, so that says something about the human condition. I once interviewed the former assistant for Hunter S. Thompson, the guy who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the forefather of this gonzo journalism style. And I said, hey, what was it like working for Hunter S. Thompson? What were your reflections on his writing? And she said, the thing you learn from him is that as a journalist, he was the least truthful, but the most accurate. Of all the people who covered, I think it was the 1968 election, which he covered, he was the least truthful, but the most accurate. Isn't that pretty interesting? The idea that truth and accuracy aren't always the same things. And I think that there's something there with the liberal arts, and definitely something there with the Bible. You know, who knows? Some people say, oh, I'm a Bible maximalist. This is totally true. This is a historical record. Other people say, it's just a metaphor. But you know what? There's, if it's persisted for this long, isn't there something accurate about the Bible that's worth studying? I think a lot of the liberal arts is like that. It's very revelatory. And I have taken a lot from just learning about Peter and his commitment to studying the liberal arts that I really want to emulate. It's been very inspiring for me. And then also, look, studying the Bible is a metaphor for escaping the never-ending now. It's just wild to me that we're so caught in this world where we're consuming things from the last 24 hours. You know, I was in New York. I used to throw these parties for influencers, and I remember we had thrown one party, and we were heading over to a comedy show after the party, and so we rented one of those big Uber SUVs, and so I was in the back. I remember like squeezing through the back, like doing gymnastics to get back there. And I'm sitting back there. I'm like, okay, let's look at what these people are checking on their phones. I was more interested in the meta question, like what platforms are people consuming and stuff like that. And everything people had consumed had been created in the last 24 hours. Snapchat stories, Instagram stories, Twitter feeds, Facebook feeds. I was like, what? Like, there's so much checking in modern life. Checking of notifications, checking of what are people saying right now. And, like, do I need to play, like, how much do I need to play that game? And then if I do need to play that game, when I do consume things, shouldn't I escape what's been created in the last 24 hours as much as possible? Why am I ignoring the accumulated wisdom of past centuries in favor of what the conversation is in the here and now? And so I'm just trying to get out of the common conversation as much as I can. Muting words on Twitter. I'm not really listening to podcasts. Definitely no podcasts about what's happening in the world right now. I don't really read news publications. And the point isn't that you should be uninformed. Of course, sometimes you should know about what's happening in the world. Absolutely. Absolutely. But the level to which people focus on what's happening in the world right now versus studying and soaking in the accumulated wisdom of our ancestors, it just seems totally off to me. And back to liberal arts, I mean, that's the source code of our society. Intellectual history is the source code of our society. I wrote a piece this year called Why You're Christian. And I say, okay, why do we believe in human rights in America? Okay, let's go back to the Declaration of Independence. Okay, but then we say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where does that come from? It comes from John Locke. Okay, where does John Locke get his ideas? And then you follow things back. And so something like human rights, which comes to life in a court of law in this present day, actually goes back hundreds of years. And originally, a lot of the ideas with human rights go back to the idea of Imago Dei, that we are made in the image of God, which is a religious idea. And so that's why I study the liberal arts. I want to understand why we think the way we think. Why are we the way we are? And then one of the other things I want to do this year is I want to start hosting salon dinners. You know, one of the other things that I've picked up from dinner with Peter and a lot of the way that he moves through the world is he has long dinners all the time. And it's a lot of the way that he's trying to make sense of the world. He's really good at asking questions, bringing in smart people. I want to do that. I mean, I want to cultivate this intellectual network in my life where we're hosting dinners in Austin, and I'm going to do them with my friend Justin Bears that are intellectually stimulating, that are well organized, high quality service, a chef, a dress code. I want people to, a theme for the conversation, really high quality, everyone focused on one topic, trying to make sense of the world. And then eventually I want that to grow into small multi-day conferences where I'll invite scholars, I'll invite writers, I'll invite creators, I'll invite entrepreneurs. We'll come together, we'll talk about a single idea for the weekend. You know, how cool would it be to have the world's top Girard scholars, fly them all in for a weekend of intense conversations? I would love to do that. That's what I want to be doing more and more of. And so in order to make that happen, you know, I always think of serendipity vehicles. It's a key part of Rite of Passage. But what do I put out into the world that becomes like an attractor, like an intellectual magnet for people, ideas, and opportunities? What can I put out into the world? And so that's always where I begin. You know, people know how to use the internet, but I don't think that people are deliberate enough using this incredible tool that you have in your pocket to really think through, how can I send these signals out into the world that are going to create opportunities and enrich my social life? And so what I want to start doing is recording lecture series and actually creating my own liberal arts education, which I've now been writing about for years. I want to have the definitive lecture series on as many of the great Western thinkers as I can. How cool would that be in terms of just my own ability to learn things in an intelligent, efficient way? But also, I think it'd be really cool for the world to have these things. And so what I want to do is find really high-quality scholars who are good at communicating their ideas to, who understand one person very well. And I want to fly them to Austin to basically record these really high-quality lecture series. So I'm starting with Renee Girard and Jonathan B., who I mentioned earlier, who lives in my building, and he's been studying Girard for 5 years. So we got a $20,000 grant from Tyler Cowen's Emergent Ventures program. And we're going to record over 4 days. He has about 45,000 pages of notes and a script that he's working off of. And then later in the year, I'm going to work with my friend Ellen, and we're going to record one about Shakespeare, and then my friend Justin, and we're going to do one about Deleuze. And so, look, the goal is really to, if you want to learn about these people, this will be the place where you can do that. And it'll be more rigorous than SparkNotes. It'll be more about, hey, here's an introduction that you can come back to after you read their work, but it's also going to be something that inspires you to get into it. And I always think, okay, what is in it for the guest? And I think that there's 3 things. We're going to have free distribution, so hopefully this channel grows into a couple 100,000 subscribers, a really high quality audience. I mean, the people who are going to be receptive to these ideas are going to be smart and curious people. And then also when they come to Austin, I'll put them up in a studio I'd like to build. And so that's where I'll end things. You know, one of the words I think a lot about is harmony and synthesis. And how can I bring different ideas together? I'm smiling because when I was going to basketball camp as a kid, I had this coach. His name was Elliot Smith. And he said, if you put up 5 fingers like this, his basketball coach, if you put up 5 fingers like this and you hit somebody with your palm, it hurts. But if you bring those 5 fingers together and you put them into a fist and you punch someone, now that really hurts. And as trite as it is, it's a damn good point. Where if you can bring your different projects together from a palm to a fist and find things that allow all of them to do better, those things are worth investing in. And so what I want to do, I said I'm ready to double down. I'm ready to commit. I want to build a production studio in Austin. I want to rent a house. I want that house to be Rite of Passage headquarters. It'll have different rooms that anyone can stay in, friends, family, partners of the business whenever they come visit. I want different offices in there so that it'll be a headquarters for people in Rite of Passage. Increasingly, I would love to have the executive team in Rite of Passage, if not full-time, many months out of the year, many weeks out of the year. And then it can be a place where we can record this lecture series. It can be a place for my social hub, for my social life, and a social hub for it, where we can host parties and stuff like that. And it'll be a production studio where can have different sets, maybe start a podcast again that's focused on video. And all that can come together with the production studio. And you can see how all the different goals, from starting that liberal arts YouTube channel to building the business to having long-term friends and a long-term network in Austin to committing to Austin as a long-term home, all those things come together in one project. And so that's why you do these interviews, to basically get the palm and turn it into that fist. And so I'll come back now to Rite of Passage. The course has now been taken by more than 1,000 students in 50 countries, which is just insane to say. And we're finally beginning to see some real success with some of our alums. Packy McCormick is one of the fastest growing business analysts in the world. He has his Not Boring newsletter. He's been featured on CNBC. He just raised $8 million for his investment fund and accepted a position with Andreessen Horowitz, which is pretty cool to watch for somebody who was a student just about 2.5 years ago in our first ever cohort. And then Ana Lorena Fabregas, she's become one of my best friends, and she now has one of the world's largest audiences focused on childhood education. And she's writing her first book, joined a fast-growing startup called Synthesis, which I'm an investor in. And watching them grow, and then watching other students like Jonathan Hillis and Pamela Hobart, Michael Ashcroft, Rahun Jahar, there's really this alumni base of people who have been successful, which is, once again, one of those things that makes me want to throw the fuel on the fire. And in order to do that, I need to remove myself as a bottleneck. I think entrepreneurship happens in 3 stages. You start off and you basically just have a job. You do all the hard work yourself. Sure, you're working for yourself, but it's like you're working 60 or 70 hours a week for yourself, so you don't have to work 40 hours a week for somebody else. That's how it begins. And then you move into the management phase where you're hiring people to do the work that you used to do. But it's still very labor intensive. You're still super involved. And I'm just beginning to move into that phase now. But then eventually what you're doing is you're operationalizing things, and you're building systems and codifying your decision-making process so that your business can run without your active involvement. I mean, you've basically built a machine that runs on its own. And that is when you're building generational wealth. That is the ultimate goal of entrepreneurship. That's when real money is made and real impact is had, because you have scaled something way beyond yourself. And so I'm right now just the bottleneck in too many core business functions. And I just always feel like I'm holding something up. No matter how hard I work, I'm holding something up. Somebody needs this, somebody needs that. Hey, David, you haven't done this. And who knows why? Maybe I'm not efficient enough. Maybe and we're getting too many projects, dude. You need to cut back. Or maybe that's just part of life, though. Maybe I just need to be okay with a certain amount of disorder in my life. I don't know. But the biggest thing is too much of the business just revolves around me. And I want to remove myself as the bottleneck, move into that management phase, and then eventually move into operation. And that way there's a system that runs on its own. That's the ultimate goal. And then when it comes to Rite of Passage, we're really beginning to think of ourselves as a talent business. Very explicitly right now, we have people like mentors and stewards. I mean, our last cohort had more than 20 people running it. It's crazy. We have mentors who tend to be more focused on teaching the actual craft of writing, and they're older, they're more authoritative, they're teaching from experience. And then we have community stewards, and they tend to be a little bit more technical, a little more detail oriented. And so what they do is they're adding energy to live session chats. They're helping people in the forums. They're editors so that every single piece in Write a Passage, every single one can get feedback. And so what we can do is we can just take the very top people who come through Write a Passage who are also enthusiastic about the program. We can put them into those leadership positions, and then we can bring them into the ecosystem. And I'm excited about Write a Passage as a place where we can find and elevate up-and-coming talent. I mean, one of the things about the internet now is talent is so often globally distributed, and Write a Passage is a beacon for those people who are ambitious and intellectually curious. And so what are the ways that also we can identify really high-quality writers, and then what do we do with them to grow Write a Passage and to help their careers? I don't know. That's a big question, but it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. And then some of them can become full-time employees too, right? And so I guess the other big question about Write a Passage is like, what is our core competency? I think a lot about this. And why do we exist? So there's one way of thinking about this where we exist to help online writers. We build products for them. And so that means we're expanding into investing and job recruiting. And so say somebody becomes an online writer, we help them get a job and climb the professional ladder. And what I like about that is we're really focused on the mission of helping people become citizens of the internet, cultivate stronger friend groups, accelerate their career. And then we're a little closer to a coding bootcamp or something. And then the other option is to focus on educational experiences. And honestly, this is what my gut says, that even within the world of online writing, we are really focused on education. That's what we do well. And so instead of launching new products for our existing audience, we launch the same product or tweak it for new audiences. And so within that, I'm most excited about business writing. And so I've long had the belief that business writing is going to be important because of the way that remote work inverts corporate communication. So in-person work is focused on voice and is synchronous, whereas remote work tends to be more focused on chat and text and is asynchronous. And that's a big transition. And a lot of companies are going to a remote work way of working, at least part of the time. And also you're seeing companies like Stripe and Amazon that have these very writing intensive cultures do really well. And I think I've had a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs who want my help teaching their companies how to write. Good writing leads to good thinking, and good thinking leads to good strategy. It's kind of just that simple. And then also we have this thing in the business where our revenue is really spiky. So this year, we're going to run a cohort in March. We're going to run another cohort in October. And those launches are, right now, the only time when there's real revenue coming in. The rest of the year is flat. But I have to pay a full-time team. I mean, this year, the expenses are going to be almost $1 million in fixed costs. And so what happens if I got really sick for the first cohort? We had to cancel it. Boom, second cohort. Now a lot is riding on that. And so I think that what we could do is, rather than running 5-week programs for consumers like we do now, so in addition to that, what we could do is we could run 5-day cohorts for people who are interested in business writing. And rather than selling to every single customer individually, I can make a couple calls and we can have people from Facebook, people from Salesforce, people from who knows what Apple, who knows what company, send a couple thousand people to learn business writing. Or we specifically work with startups. I don't know. We got to figure it out. But I've just had a lot of people who've said, hey, I would love to send my employees to do business writing. Can you launch that product? So I'm thinking about that now. And I think that our unique approach, this writing on the right side of the brain approach, helps us with business writing, in that, unlike most people really focused on logic and rules like normal writing school will stay focused on play and fun and the vigor that Rite of Passage uniquely has. And then finally, I want to build an independent publishing company around Rite of Passage. So what I want is to have, right now there's the David Perell brand, which the Rite of Passage brand really relies on. Everything comes through my personal list and my personal writing, which means I got to work really hard in order for things to grow. That's a job. That is not like the management phase and scaling a business in the way that it could be. And so what I would love to have is to have Rite of Passage have its own publishing company. I want that place to be the best place to learn about writing in the world. There's videos. It is a place. It's free if you want it to be free, and it's paid if you want it to be paid, because we offer different products and we have email courses and we have an amazing YouTube channel and a podcast, and I'm only producing a fraction of that content. And for me, the inspiration is Y Combinator. I mean, if you go on their website, Paul Graham only produces a fraction of the stuff there. And the Y Combinator brand is so strong that you know you're going to get good stuff about how to start a startup. Doesn't really matter who makes it. They can actually bring in domain experts and you can do a better job than Paul Graham ever could for that specific area. That's a compliment to Paul Graham. It's basically saying, hey, he built a great system here. And the less I'm a linchpin in Rite of Passage, the more valuable the business can become, the less I'll have to be in the spotlight, and the more that we can execute on what it is that we want to do, what we believe in, the products that we want to launch. And so look, if I were to summarize everything so far, I'll read this because I want it to be succinct, but Rite of Passage is the nucleus of my professional life. So I'm not about to become one of those internet guys with a bunch of revenue streams. That simple decision clarifies many aspects of my life. Professionally, my career improves when I write high-quality essays and grow my email list by being active on Twitter. Socially, I want to surround myself with people who love ideas and intellectual conversations. Creatively, I'd like to continue pursuing ideas for their own sake, just as I've done with the Porter Robinson documentary. Intellectually, I want to spend as much time as possible in pursuit of interesting ideas and writing nonfiction essays about emerging themes with a focus on culture, education, and digital technology. Geographically, even though I'd like to keep exploring major cities around the world, Austin will be my home for the foreseeable future. Done right, the harmony of all these pursuits will create a trampoline effect where I can jump higher and do so with less effort and more joy. And so there you can just see it's that hand becoming the fist, going from a slap to a punch. And that's what I'm trying to do here. And I know that whether it's spiritually or intellectually or emotionally, there's even stuff I've focused on a lot in my personal life, which I've sort of kept out of this, but I'll leave with a story because I think that it comprises a lot of what I'm thinking about. And that sort of opportunity that lies above where I am. And in college, I used to go on these weekend trips out to the Appalachian Mountains, and I'd go to Great Smoky National Park and South North Carolina. And the park is famous for the way that these pillows of fog sort of hang inside the mountains. And so if you drive up to the top of the mountains, you'll see the pillow of fog halfway up the mountain, but from the bottom, you can't see any of the sky because the fog is so thick. And there was one morning where you could see the sky, and I was camping. It was a cold October morning, and I was camping, and I just woke up. I was freezing, and I woke up, and I just couldn't sleep anymore before the sun rose. Still stars in the sky, and I went out, and I saw my friend Nate, and Nate had camped here a couple times and said, "Hey man, let's go for a hike." So we put these headlamps on our foreheads, and we walked out. He said, "There's a great waterfall out here that I want to take you to." So we go out, probably walk 2 miles or something, and we end up by this waterfall. And we're sitting there, and there's just this beautiful sound of the water rushing, and we're looking up at this purple and pink sunrise. For once, that cloud cover had lifted. And we're looking up at the sunrise. We can see the top of the mountains. We can see the sky. And there's just this clarity, this like beautiful perfection in the sky. And the waterfall is just a soundtrack to that moment. And there were no words that needed to be spoken. And so as the sun rose and began to hit our skin, we stood up and we marched back to base camp. And years later, we still talk about that morning. By the time we got back, the clouds had returned. We couldn't see the sky again. But as I think about 2022 and what I want to do after, my goal is to find paths that are going to help me ascend above that fog belt, where I've seen those colorful skies. And sometimes I do feel like I'm under the fog. I'm so focused on whatever it is that I'm doing. And I know that there's more that I can discover emotionally, socially, intellectually. And sometimes I don't really know what it is. But I think a lot of curiosity is driven by our memories of those epiphanies. And those epiphanies are just like looking at those skies where one day there just isn't cloud cover and you just always remember that you can climb higher. And eventually, if you reach some kind of enlightenment, you climb up the mountain high enough where you're forever above those clouds. So, just a parting thought. Thanks for spending this time with me.